Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We are live here today, this afternoon instead of morning, and wanted to come to talk to you guys all about what's happening in Edmonton's real estate market. And if you haven't already caught my video about what does the housing market look like with the tariffs, the video is out and you can watch that. And this coming week, we have our monthly market stats of what happened for the month of January in Edmonton's real estate market. So each week we talk about single family home market on Tuesdays. But once a month, I talk about the entire real estate market as a whole and what's happening in all of Edmonton and area. Today, we're talking about what's happening. As usual, we always talk about the current listings that are for sale, and they've gone up a little bit. So last week, we saw the numbers dip down a little bit, but previous to that, we were starting to see the numbers climb. And climb is a moderate term. It's not climbing like really fast or drastic, but it is coming upwards. And if you take a look at St. Albert and Sherwood Park and Spruce Grove, they've all followed suit as well. This is normal for houses to start to get more on the market. And what that means is, again, there's more listings coming on the market than there are buyers buying homes, but that does not mean we are in a buyer's market. We are still very much in a seller's market. If you look at the fact that there's only 1,359 single family homes for sale in Edmonton, that's pretty low. To give you some context, about 5 years ago, when we thought the market was at an all time low, we were at least double this number. I think we're actually a little bit higher than that, 2.5 times higher. And we thought things were spare back then, but it definitely isn't now. So if you take a look at the pending sales, how many properties went into contract in this last week, we saw slightly a little less than the week before. And we see that kind of consistent with all the surrounding areas. And people are wondering if the weather has anything to do with it. It has a slight bit of things to do with it, but it also depends on the price point. Again, anything under $500,000 will move quickly if priced properly. And so if they were listed last week, they're very likely already pending, if not sold. So what happens is if they are in multiple offers and you see an offer that has no conditions, it goes straight into sold, or people have removed conditions. So in the last 7 days compared to the week before, you can see that we were slightly a little lower. But again, like I said, it is indicative of weather. It is a bit colder, but it doesn't completely stop people from looking at homes. It is Alberta, and we're used to looking at homes in the cold. And for those of you who have moved here from out of province, welcome to Alberta. This is actually the temperature you usually get, and we've seen a pretty warm start of the year. Now, if you take a look at the Edmonton sales compared to last year, we are slightly lower than we were last year at this time. And we started off this year in January seemingly a lot busier than we were last year. And that a lot has to do with the fact that we don't, again, have as many properties for sale, and we still have a huge amount of buyers looking to buy. There's a lot of clients just waiting, not because not being realistic, but because there's literally nothing to buy. So if you are a seller considering and debating on listing your home, you definitely are not going to have an issue depending on the price point. Now, what's happening for those price points over 600,000? If they're priced accurately, they can still move quickly. We have had seen that in both the 600 range, the $1 million range. They've got to be marketed and listed properly in their price point. Those ones typically will sit longer than, of course, the ones under 500. However, in this market, they still should move within a couple weeks. And if they're not, the price is probably the biggest reason why it's sitting on the market. And so you need to be mindful. There's a lot of sellers who are overly optimistic on what their home is worth, and we need the actual proof. And the actual proof at the end of the day is how many people are coming to look at your home, and then you can decide, oh, we either underprice it or overprice it. I always say there's no such thing as underpricing a home, because you can always the market will always auto adjust itself, and people will make sure to pay what the house is actually worth. Today, I was going to show you a little bit around the West Edmonton neighborhood market so you can kind of see that. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments and I'd be happy to try to answer them if I'm able to answer. So I wanted to take a look at Ormsby Place. Now, this is an older neighborhood in West Edmonton. And for those of you watching that don't know where Ormsby Place is, I'll show you a quick map on Google Maps of the location of Ormsby. So it is located in the west end of Edmonton. I'm just going to close this. And you can see it's right here. It's on this side of the Anthony Henday. So this side's the newer side, this side's the older side. You will see properties in Ormsby Place from the 80s into the early 2000s. Well, actually, that might be into the 90s. I don't know if 2000s is actually even there. Ormsby Place is split into two different areas. This side is the older side that's going to be 80s, 70s. And then over here is the late 80s, early 90s. On this side, I actually grew up in this neighborhood. It was known as the Woods, but in MLS and on the maps here, it's Ormsby Place. So these homes are different than these homes. You can't really compare the two areas. You can and you can't. So that's important to note. So let's take a look at the last 60 days. We only had one property sell, and it did sell for $590,000. And let me just see the square footage. It was a two-story. It was on the market for 2 days, which means the house pretty much came on and got right away, which means no conditions either. And if they had conditions, it was only 1 day. So let's take a, and that was in January that it sold. I'm just going to show you. It was 3,269 square feet above grade, which is a pretty massive house. And this had a really large lot. Now, this home just came on the market yesterday, 2,000 square feet. And let's take a look at it. Right here. So this is a corner lot, and if people know, they have to shovel the snow. And this is townhouses here. So be mindful of that, because not everyone loves the fact that they have to shovel the snow. You can kind of see that people here have shoveled and it's not been shoveled, but you are responsible when you own the house here to shovel this whole piece of the sidewalk. That's not the city, that is your responsibility. And you can see they've done the lot size. And then this is the home itself inside with the oak. Pretty typical for this age because we're again in the 80s, 90s. And the older kitchen. This is listed for $530,000 just yesterday. Now, if we take a look at the other properties, there's two houses that are actually under contract, 459 and 515. And again, these are all in the older areas. This one over here was in the Woods area, so a little slightly newer, and those tend to sell for a little higher. Now let's take a look at an area that we're gonna have a new listing in here. We gotta find a house for my clients first. This is Jasper Park area. There's 11 houses in total under the 60 days. So if we take a look and see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses that sold in the last 60 days, one pending, which is like a skinny slash duplex, because you can see this side is pending, this side is still for sale at $619 for a duplex, which is kind of crazy if you ask me. And then there's $355 for this house. It's just down the street from the listing we're gonna have, and that one's just smaller than ours. Ours is a bit bigger than that one. And then you've got a few of the newer infills at $590. And then you can see the ones that sold. This bungalow sold for $510 and with 1 day on the market. So it's one of those big giant lots on the side corner here. And interesting, I don't see any interior photos. That's $510. This one sold for $400. It was listed at $360 and it sold for $40K more. Also, no interior pictures. When there's usually no interior pictures, I typically assume the inside's not so nice looking. Then you've got these other ones, 3 days on market, 12 days on market. This area goes very quickly. As you can see, if you can buy a house for $389, this is a great deal. My client's house, it looks very similar. Well, not really. It's a bungalow and it's been completely renovated, so it doesn't look like this at all. And it will not sell for $389. If we listed it for that, it would be a massive flurry, and there would be, I don't know, it would not, like I said, you can't underprice it, but we're definitely not going to be pricing at that low of a point. So there's in between 400 to 510, you see nothing that has sold in the last 60 days. Doesn't mean that wouldn't sell. It just means that's what's going on. Average price being sold is 443. But if we go and take a look at the last year of solds to give you context of what this neighborhood is worth. And also this neighborhood's really close to downtown, to West Edmonton Mall. Average price is $453 in this area. And if we take a look at what does it look like to have a house for $453, I got one at 450 and one 455. These are not even as nice as the one that we have coming up on the market. Let's take a look at this one. Oh, just one photo. That's not very helpful. So, and then this one sold for 510. This was listed at 458.5 and sold for 510 in 1 day. So that was a very aggressive multiple offer situation that is going on. Now, I'm going to go back to talking to you a little bit about the real estate market. I have some Google alerts in terms of what is happening when people are Googling real estate and what is actually happening. I'm going to read to you what happens when you Google real estate. In today's little wrap up for myself, it says housing market faces uncertainty amid economic and geopolitical shifts, says the CMHC. So this is something that people were wondering about, and that's why I made the video. We had a very strong start. There was this apprehension, and let's be honest, that kind of question mark was already there before it officially got announced. Now you have all these like big question marks, but realistically you've always had question marks in the real estate market, and I don't believe that's actually going to hinder the Edmonton real estate market because we're still so affordable compared to the major areas. It's not hitting us as hard. So for example, in Toronto, I saw an article talking about how people who bought their house like a pre-sale condo in 2020, the value is now less than it was back then. No big surprise, Toronto and Vancouver are quite inflated and they have seen a bit of a market slowdown, but we have not seen that over here. So just because it's happening in Toronto doesn't mean it's going to happen here. It doesn't mean we follow it. We used to follow Calgary a couple months behind, but now with the market in the price point being so separate and different, we don't see that happening either. So I'll just share with you what this article looks like here. So it's talking about the uncertainty of, oh, I don't need this ad, the 2025 housing market. I think they're just trying to put this in because when they prepared their forecast, they didn't account for all this happening probably. So it just says that even though there's all these uncertainty, there are lower mortgage rates happening and making home ownership still more accessible. So the resale market's still gaining strength. And I've seen this quite a few times, the slower housing market start. So that's the new builds. New builds are not seeing a very strong start to the year. And so that's potentially an opportunity. But I know that the new home sales are always looking at the resale market, trying to say that they can also dictate higher prices because in the resale market it is. But I don't think they've forgotten that there's quite a span of price differential when it comes to that. So it'll be interesting to see because if they're having difficulty selling pre-construction, what that's going to mean is that in about 6 months to a year, you're not going to see as many options for new builds for specs. You're probably going to see less next year. So if the housing market continues to be strong in the resale market, we typically also take our clients to look at new builds, but next year there might not be a whole bunch of extra options for people to look at. So that's something to consider if you're thinking about buying new versus old. Make sure you consider that. And I don't see any questions in the comments. You guys are quieter than my morning crowd. So next week when we talk in the morning, I hope that we'll be able to answer some more questions. But in the meantime, make sure to check out those videos coming to you live this week and the one that just came live earlier this week.